Welcome to Renew Conversations. I'm Somnath and I'm joined by Professor Rohit Gupta, Associate Professor of Gender and Sexuality and Deputy Head of Department of Gender Studies at the London School of Economics. Welcome, Rohit, and thank you for joining.
Thank you so much, Somnath, for inviting me.
A 2014 World Bank report on the economic cost of exclusion of LGBTQIA people found a direct correlation between discrimination in employment and lower productivity. The study also highlighted a significant gender wage gap and disparities particularly high for gay employees at 11%. Advancing LGBTQ inclusion requires more than normative state. That's the finding world over. It demands robust accountability, standardized metrics, integrated funding, sustained political will across sectors, etc., etc. So, Pride Month 2026 offers us a moment to examine how Indian industry can move to becoming more structural driver of inclusion. My question to you, Rohit, is how has the evolving representation in India, particularly around LGBTQIA folks, in your opinion, over the decades?
So, thanks so much, Somnath, for that question. I think you're absolutely right. Kind of trying to frame this through media in the first instance, because as we are well aware, various academics from Adrian Atik to others have written about how important the Indian media sphere is, both, in terms of our film industry, to television, to, of course, now, digital media and OTP platforms. One of the things that has been we've seen over the years is how much the politics of representation when it has come to LGBT identities have evolved over time. So, we've had early films where we've seen, caricatures of gay men, but also predominantly, I think, in over the last sort of 10 years, because of this kind of very burgeoning OTP platforms, because I was reading somewhere that some of the India-based platforms actually have much more users than, say, Netflix or Prime, which I think is amazing, given the kind of the wide viewership we have in India. And we've seen like some really hard-hitting, queer narratives being pushed over there, which has, of course, led to a lot of attitudinal transformation and change. So, for example, a film like, just to give you, an example that is very close to my heart, of course, is the kind of films that, say, Rituparno Ghosh made, which middle-class Bengalis were watching, right? And so suddenly issues that were considered taboo, that was considered not to be said within the kind of the respectable sort of middle-class households became topics that people were speaking about in kind of framing where we are, I think, today as a nation.
That's what I felt, Adi was there. How do you see the concept of allyship, and how can people perhaps today, based on your experiences, sort of your research and things, kind of move beyond symbolic gestures to perhaps some kind of structural change within systems?
I mean, this is such a good question. One of the things I always advocate, both in kind of, my academic work and also the other hat I wear as a politician, as a local councillor over here in London, has always been that we need to kind of work together. So it is not just the state and government and academia, but it's also kind of the private industries. How do we all, kind of the private sector, how do we all come together? Because, genuine change is not going to come unless we have all of these three levers in place for us. And I think that is the difference, that it is not just being that tick box exercise, but on the town hall flying the flag, but it's actually what genuine policies are you bringing in, what genuine actions are you taking to make the lives of queer people, whether you're their employees or whether, in my case, whether it's my students or whether it is my constituents, what are we doing actually to make their lives better or safe and secure, as opposed to just saying, what, I put up the pride flag and that's good enough for me. And I think for me, that is what your question sort of gestured towards, that it can't just be symbolic. It's about being more than that. And I've seen that like in the kind of the Indian landscape, lots and lots of of the private sector has got DEI departments. I think they are genuinely, my understanding is, trying to make a change, whether it is, sticks out to me in terms of, working with their employees, but also like actually making change, right? Whether it's same-sex partner benefits or whether it is just, bringing in policies around homophobia, transphobia, and so on. So I think for me, that is what genuine allyship is, that you actually turn that into action and not just kind of mere platitudes that, yeah, things are going to be better or I'm with you. That doesn't help anyone.
Right, absolutely. So, so how do you see perhaps, like taking on from your experience, right, within your constituency, but how do you see in India perhaps affirmative action, take shape? I'm thinking more in policies and more specifically in the private sector, perhaps, as sort of engines of inclusion, and how do you think that different stakeholders, that academia, you have industry, you have different groups, maybe policy, and all of that perhaps can work together to accelerate representation?
I think you've hit the nail on the head, Shomnath. And I think I'm just thinking, what you started off this conversation with, right, where you kind of cited the World Bank report about the economic costs of homophobia and transphobia. 0.1 to 0.7, I think you said, for India, right? Which is a pretty big thing, right? And I feel like there will be they all have to work together for any genuine change to happen. If there are parts of the private sector, which I would probably say is a bit more capital driven in terms of, or economic driven, let's use that word. I would say, I think a genuine argument over there is, if you do not have affirmative action, you're going to be losing good people. If you do not have affirmative action, allies are not going to be visiting you. There is some genuine economic costs to you being terrible people, being transphobic and homophobic. I think for the public sector, it is as much the same. You work in the public sector because you genuinely want to work with people. You want to represent people, or you are genuinely believe in kind of public service. Which means even if your ideologies might be different from those people who you're serving, you still need to make sure, you're governed by certain policies of anti-discrimination, policies of inclusion that make that work. So I would say, again, examples of these being, we've already seen, it's not always been successful, but we've seen, for example, on a state level, trans welfare boards that have been set up everywhere, which is about, providing gainful employment. We've seen this in the private sector in terms of having, anti-discrimination laws, but also kind of policies which recognize same-sex partnerships. And within, I think academia is so important. Well, that is the tools that we want to give them. But absolutely, I think it is time for stronger affirmative action. I think, we have to move beyond the previous question about the symbolic gestures. And unfortunately, what we are seeing on a very global scale is a certain bit of rollback when it comes to the states. And I think really this is the time for both kind of academia and the private sectors to probably pick up and show where their kind of support.
Absolutely. I agree. I think it's talent, that is the real sort of driving engine in the private sector. So it's performance, right? And performance, and how innovatively, how interestingly you can deliver, right? How can you deliver, how can you bring in more value, at least in the private sector, right? More utility, which kind of really kind of turns into profitability for, yes, precisely. That's even my thought process. Thank you so much.
So first of all, I haven't read that particular report that you've mentioning, but of course, I think if you look at the kind of the 17 goals that the SDG kind of framework, right? I think it's very much about inclusion, right? It's about no poverty, it's about gender equality, it is about reducing inequalities. And I think it is definitely upon us, in whatever leadership position that we have, whether it's in academia, in civil society, in private sector, to make sure that we are definitely pushing that. Obviously, working towards shared goals. Of course, not all of it is going to be easy sailing. There are going to be challenges, but I think then it is also kind of upon us to make sure that we work together to do it, because at the end of the day, as an academic, as a counselor, I'm interested in my residents, I'm interested in my students. The private sector is interested in making sure that they are serving their customers, but also they have good, happy employees. So it's a win-win situation. So I think for me, it's about dialogue. And kind of making those things work. No. I was going to just thank you and your colleagues for inviting me to do this. It's just great to be here. I mean, it's also such a kind of memorable thing given where India is right now on kind of sexual rights, that the West is not the queer utopia people think, and in many ways a lot of people are much more safer. And I think what I've seen and what really has amazed me is the absolute stellar role in India that higher education sector, the private sector, select state bureaucrats have all played. And I think that's so important, for any progress to be made.